Yeah. All right, we are recording. Great. So it's 3:35 now, and let's get a start with this session today. So once again, thanks everyone for coming in. So I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Benjamin from the SAY Club, which is Industrial Design Student Club. With me today, I also have Jenny, who's a fellow board member. Shank is also our treasurer, and he'll be keeping tabs on the chat box for this chat today. And we're also really, really honored to have Nicholas Perillo with us today. He's an RMIT Industrial Design alumni, and he's very much established in his career. He's founded the Augmentl Studios and also the Design Institute of Australia's Graduate of the Year Award for both industrial design and the overall program. And without any further ado, I'd like to just let him take the stage here and talk a little bit more about himself and his projects.
Awesome, thanks, Benjamin. Yeah, so I graduated in 2017. And since then, I've been sort of diving into the world of lighting design, not quite lighting design, but light art, and a lot of crazy sort of projects associated with that. I've been really fortunate in that I've landed in this space that when I was studying, I didn't know existed. I'll share with you a bit of, I need you to enable screen sharing.
So let me just double check that. I think I've just done it. Give that a shot.
Oh, got it.
All right, awesome.
So some of you might have seen one of my uni projects was this crazy skateboard. And this sort of sparked my sort of passion for making things and just making crazy things. And that was always a theme of my work at university, just trying to push the boundaries and work on the craziest stuff I possibly could, because at the time I thought I wouldn't be able to do that in professional work. I thought, okay, I've got no briefs, I've got no people that sort of constrain me here, so I might as well go crazy. And this was the result of one of those projects that kept me up for many late nights, and that sort of led into this. I sort of thought, okay, well, I don't really have any boundaries anymore, so I better start learning electronics. And then Morph was created in my honors year, where I was looking at tangible media interfaces and how to make data physical, and bring the digital world more into the physical space. And I started looking at these modular electronics, and for some reason suggested to myself that I should turn it into a sphere, which ended up being really difficult, but highly rewarding. And that whole process was pretty insane. There was a lot of stuff that I learned. A lot of stuff, because I didn't really have an electronics background traditionally. Just had to learn this sort of stuff on the fly. So I was learning how to design PCBs and all these new fabrication processes, and yeah, I somehow made this crazy thing work. And at the time while I was building this, I was fortunate to be working at Folio 3D, making 3D models for architectural projects. So I had access to some pretty amazing fabrication equipment. But Morph sort of quickly led me into lighting design. I think I showed the ball off at the honors show, and the next day I had a job at an electronics engineering company called Tect. And that was a really interesting place to work for. They had lots of cool fabrication equipment, and they were also working on some pretty weird stuff. And then this job at RMIT Illumination came up, and it seemed a bit unreal at the time because they were just literally making art. That was the only thing that they did. So I worked on a few projects. This is a really small one for a client, but I just worked on the technical design of this Vivid installation. There's an installation in Singapore that I did quite a bit of work on. This new one, the Bumper Jar Art Centre in Cairns, Queensland. It's a sort of, we call it a digital canvas. So the Indigenous community can sort of do artist residencies on this massive building facade. And then more recently in Queensland, the University of the Sunshine Coast's Moreton Bay campus. I was the lead designer on this project where we created a multi-dimensional facade display. So this has a high resolution and a low resolution display. So behind the perforated panels, there's actually backlighting onto the walls. It creates this crazy depth to the work. And you can have multiple pieces of contact interacting with each other. And then I guess that leads me to now. And I'm in a position at the moment that I still can't believe that I'm in. I moved to Berlin 2 weeks ago to start working on Morph again, unbelievably. So maybe a year ago, I partnered up with Mind Buffer and Mitch and Josh. Well, Josh is actually a RMIT professor, I guess, for industrial design. He was my honors tutor. But yeah, about a year ago, I called him up for a project for Melbourne Music Week, just to get a bit of help on that. And then we actually ended up, diving into this project and creating a bit of a video campaign to share on social media. And somehow someone picked up on it that had big enough pockets to buy a real thing. And we're due to install this in a gallery in Europe in November. So I've got a pretty crazy timeline ahead of me to create a 1.5 meter version with about 500 faces of this crazy robot. Hence why I've probably got red eyes and bags under them. I'm sort of working every hour that I can at the minute, creating this crazy thing. Working out of Motion Lab in Berlin, which is like a garage, a maker space, I guess. But they've got all sorts of cool people doing crazy things. So it's the perfect environment. This is a bit of a sneak peek of what it's going to be. I can't really tell you like where or why just yet, but yeah, basically it's just a massive version of the original Morph. It's got about 90,000 LEDs in it, 500 faces. Each one of those is actuated by a stepper motor, and they're all driven by this crazy Ethernet structure, and it will probably draw about 20 kilowatts of power at peak. It's a real beast. This is a bit of how it works. It's basically a motor, LED panel, some custom electronics, and we're doing everything ourselves from the ground up. It's completely custom. Everything's basically 3D printed or manufactured, and you can kind of see all the LEDs there. A lot. Got some of the electronics I've been working on. LED panel, and then the inside of the ball. Just to give you a bit of a comparison of how big this is the original Morph node. Morph V1 was about maybe 500 millimeters in diameter. This is the base of the new one. So there's 3 times as many or something like that. So it's a pretty crazy project. And yeah, that's about it for the intro, I guess. That's where I am today.
That is very cool. Thanks for sharing, Nicholas.
No.
I'm gonna also just quickly mention here, so this whole segment from now to pretty much the end of this seminar will just be open to Q&A. So myself and Jenny will be asking Nicholas some questions, a little bit to explain a little bit more about all things from his projects or just university studies in the industrial design or moving into the career. But we're also very much open to anyone on this call to ask any questions. So you can do so by just quickly chucking it into the chat box here. And we can bring it up in the conversations. Or if you want to, I think we still couldn't quite figure out how to get the raise hands, but if you want to check out like a quick reaction or just type in chat, say like, I've got a question, we'll just invite you to unmute yourself and ask Nicholas your question. Just added that. But fantastic. I think one question I would like to really ask, I think we're all really blown away with the project that you work with Morph and even just with the version 2. But one of the things that I think quite a few students were also curious about was how did you get about sort of teaching yourself the electronics? Because you did mention that you didn't really come from electronics background, and I don't think industrial design, it's still very much focused on that sort of like production, that fabrication method, but I don't think, you know, there's such an extent of doing a unit that will get you from 0.0 all the way to making a lighting project like yours. Like, how did you go about teaching yourself that, or did you go through some program or experience?
There's no real method to it other than I just needed to, in my own mind, I needed to make it. So I needed to learn whatever was necessary to create it. So I didn't go and, you know, learn everything about electronics. It was just like dribs and drabs of, oh, Google this, how does this work, Google that. I was fortunate to have access to a few friends that were electronics engineers who I could sort of ask questions. But I think up to 2016 or even 15, I hadn't touched an Arduino. I didn't really know how to use one. Wasn't until I did the electronics prototyping class at RMIT where I really got stuck into it. And then, I mean, you can take it as far as you want to take it, and I just went a little too far, I guess. But I didn't really do any particular course or anything. It was just whatever I needed to learn. I had this sort of project in mind and the drive to find out whatever I needed to for it.
Oh, that's amazing. We've actually just got a couple questions in as well. I'll just jump to that. So Sam's got just asking, what's the biggest challenge with Morph 2.0, the software or the engineering?
They are both massive projects. So fortunately, I don't have to do a whole lot of the software side of things because Josh and Mitch are absolute weapons. They've got their own creative coding framework that they've built called Nano. If anyone's interested, it's based on the Rust programming language. But yeah, they are like really good at this sort of stuff. So creating a full-on custom GUI for it, and like it's gonna, like if you put it on a big screen, you could probably fly an airplane with all the controls you've got for this thing. And it's got to, you know, it's going to feed in audio and LED data, and it's got to process it all fast enough so that it's at least like 120 frames a second or whatever we'll end up with. And then, you know, that's just the software, and then we've got the firmware for the actual electronics, which are a whole other project. And then, yeah, the engineering is pretty challenging. I'm sort of battling with all that at the minute, trying to get stuff done as soon as possible so I can make orders. It's pretty crazy being able to just like create whatever I want at the minute and then hopefully materialize it pretty soon.
Has COVID affected your lead times?
Not yet, but it probably will. An interesting thing about this project, as I said, it started about a year ago, but when COVID hit, the project died. So at that time, we had a year to build this. And then they went radio silent, the client, and then a month and a half ago, maybe, it just popped up again, and the deadline was the same. So that's why we got this crazy deadline. So basically, I'm building Morph V1 times 5 or whatever in about the same time. Yeah.
Crazy.
I guess that's how COVID affects my lead time. And it'll probably have effects on purchasing stuff, I imagine, too. So we're going to try and get some orders out as soon as possible, basically, so we can have as much room as possible to sort of have a buffer zone.
Very cool. We've also got another question from Raybang. He's just asking, was it difficult to start up your own practice? Did working under other organizations help you?
I did it more out of necessity, just to sort of put a name or put a brand to what I was doing. So when this project popped up, essentially I created the business. I already had a bit of an ABM going, so I could do freelance work. Yeah, I mean, in terms of setting up, there's not much to it, unless you want to do it really well, and then there is. But I'm just sort of hacking away at it and sort of beating away the problems as they come, like tax and all that sort of fun stuff. But I mean, I'd say if you want to do it, just do it. You can start your branding whenever you want, really, and that can evolve. You don't have to settle on anything. I guess working with other organizations helped see potential future business structures, ways of doing it, ways of not doing it. I'd sort of, I guess, opened up my eyes to the fact that not everyone, like even super well-established businesses, don't always know exactly how it's done either. You've got to make your own way. You can do your best to ask questions of people who've done it before and try and learn from their experience. But in the end, you've just got to dive in and experience it for yourself. It's the easiest way to learn.
Very good. Jenny, did you also have a question that you'd like to share or ask?
Yeah, so I'm not like an industrial design student myself, but I do also have like some questions because I've been like interested in like seeing this happen, right? It's like, first of all, it's like, what made you like want to do industrial design in the beginning, like after high school, or if you came from something else as well?
Yeah. I guess I was more interested in art in school, but I always liked making things. I don't think I even knew what industrial design was until maybe year 11, and I didn't know I wanted to do it then. I was going to do architecture, and then ended up I was going to do either architecture, sculpture, or industrial design, and thought I'd get a bit of a sea change and move to Melbourne to do industrial design. I guess what appealed to me was the fact that you could mix all these different things without a whole lot of rules surrounding it. You can bring in a bit of art here, a bit of science there, engineering here, and just sort of bring it all together and draw on all these amazing skill sets from other experts. And yeah, that really appealed to me as well as just the physical making aspect of it.
Yeah.
It's always been something I've been really interested in.
Okay, go.
Oh, so I was gonna ask like one last thing really is do you have a favorite project that isn't Morph? Like out of your other
Favorite
projects?
project?
Yeah.
I had a lot of fun making that skateboard I showed earlier, which is, I guess, more traditional industrial design. There's a few projects as well during uni that I had a lot of fun with that were absolutely unrelated to electronics. Like made this crazy conceptual bioreactor that we were meant to breathe oxygen through from algae. It was totally conceptual, but yeah, just projects like that. I liked making wacky stuff. And like I said, I thought, because I thought I'd, after industrial design, go and work for a very traditional practice and then pump out products, but it ended up being that my drive for creating wacky stuff enabled me to do that professionally.
Joseph, did you have a question you wanted to ask?
Yeah. So Nick, so your work, blurs the boundary between like art and design. So I'm curious, like when in your creative process you start considering what the clients want, because from the sounds of it, it's like you're doing what you yourself, find interesting, right? Yeah. So I'm like,
I guess it depends on what sort of work I'm doing. Because at the moment, I'm working as an artist, essentially. The client doesn't really have a lot of say in what I'm doing, which is fairly rare. Even if you're commissioned to do a custom art piece, usually they have a lot to say about it. But say if you're doing something a bit more driven by the client, I mean, that has to come in from the very beginning. And I guess with the Ramus, it was art, but it was more designing for what the client wanted for these big installations on buildings. So you have to consider what they want really early on and keep revisiting that, because it's super easy to run off and do your own thing and just sort of like lose the brief. And no one's immune to doing that, myself included. But yeah, as long as you keep just forcing yourself to come back to that brief or just re-understand the problem, it's usually not too bad.
Thank you. I'd like to also follow up. So, because you mentioned that one of your clients actually brought your work to a gallery, so I found that very interesting. So, since it's like when you present the work, you also clearly present it as design. So, I'm just wondering, like, in that space, do people care about the quantity of the work produced?
The quantity, as in like how many sketches or renders?
No, sorry. Like how many morphs do you make? Because in art, there's this idea that they want it to be unique, or that if you do a series, it's a limited quantity. And in industrial design, there's less fear of mass production. So yeah, I'm kind of curious in that kind of setting. Do they care about mass production?
Well, they probably are more drawn to the fact that it's unique. So like this won't be, hopefully it won't be the only version of it, but each version after will probably be quite different. And just the nature of the project, it would be super hard to mass produce anything in it, just because it's so strange and so complex. And yeah, I think if you did do that, the value would potentially decrease. I'd love to see hundreds of and thousands of morphs around though. That would be cool.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Are you so? Are you like hoping to see some kind of like mass customization or something?
Not really. It'll just be like it doesn't really need to be this massive sort of produced project. I'm quite happy to keep this as it is, sort of like being quite bespoke, but exploring new technologies every time you do it. So trying to push the boundaries of rapid prototyping and all the amazing stuff that you can do associated with that. Because I guess once you go into mass manufacturing, then you're looking at tooling for molds and all this sort of stuff. You just don't have the same sort of flexibility to change your ideas and adapt the design, because you're sort of focusing on, like, if I tried to make this for mass production, it would probably take me years just to finalize all the design sort of stuff, to constrain it to a point where, you know, you can chuck it in an injection molding machine or something. But yeah, it's quite, I think exploring these sort of, rapid prototyping technologies, but for end use parts, is more interesting to me.
Cool. That's really interesting to hear. So thank you very much.
No worries.
Fantastic. Yeah, all right. I was also hoping to ask a little bit more on, I think you did mention earlier as well, sort of like your process of going through all your design projects, going from the skateboard and then going into learning a little bit more about electronics in the digital prototyping unit and exploring a little bit more on that. But with that sort of process that you learned from during your studies in industrial design, was there a sort of thinking that you have, or just generally speaking, do you have any advice for other students in the program to sort of figure out what exactly they might want to explore more in industrial design, considering, again, it's such a huge, like, large spectrum that you can go in industrial design? I find a lot of students are also, just very unsure where to take that forward. But what was that process for you like, and what would you sort of suggest students try to do for that?
I guess I was in a similar boat. I didn't know what I wanted to do. My only advice would be just to sort of follow those leads that really make you passionate. Don't force yourself to be doing, like, say, one path because you think it might pay better, or the other path because people might think it's nicer, or whatever. Whatever gets you sort of ticking, you should really push towards that, because in the end, you're going to have to be doing this sort of stuff for the rest of your life. So you might as well do whatever, is fun to you. If that's just sketching, then hone down and do sketching. If that's producing renders, then that's a whole subset of skills that is super valuable. And then, this, as you said, there's so many different options, but I would say, maybe initially, if you're early on, at any time really, but explore as many of those options as you can, just to see if it's right for you. Because you might not know, it could seem out of bounds for you, like electronics, but realistically, anyone can do it. You just gotta, basically Google everything. That's how you do it.
That's too good. I think that's also sort of ties into my next question. I think you sort of semi answered it too, but obviously a lot of us right now are sort of just feeling the effects of the pandemic now, and that's definitely sort of making an impact on a lot of us. There's always like almost half of this spectrum of industrial design when you're sort of talking on, working with electronics or prototyping or even maybe to some element drawing, but anything that's sort of just a lot more physical, and that sort of absence of a studio space to work in has definitely sort of shifted that focus for a lot of students and how they sort of achieve their sort of process to learn more about industrial design. Do you have any sort of views or just advice on how students might sort of overcome that, be it sort of, I guess, online resources, or maybe even just reaching out to other industrial designers, or sort of suggestions on how to meet other people in the field to learn more from them?
Yeah, it's a really challenging question. I think like I would have struggled if I was still studying right now, because a lot of what I did was so reliant on physical prototyping and being away from my home. So yeah, I really feel for everyone right now studying, because it's not easy. It's definitely not ideal. Something like industrial design that's really practical. I guess there's no easy way to combat that. I mean, I think doing stuff like this, talking to other designers, if you can, try and maybe set up your own facility at home. I mean, if making is your thing, you can get some pretty cheap tools these days for doing that and set up your own space. I don't have a hard, fast answer for anyone, because it's a super weird time.
Totally. I believe Ray Bang also has a question.
Hey, Nick. I was going to ask you, do you ever plan on making your technology open source? Perhaps in the distant future, or?
Potentially. A lot of the software associated with it is built on open source stuff. So I wouldn't be surprised if we did go that way. Mitch and Josh are all about the open source of the game. So yeah, it's definitely possible. We might just sort of get a few projects out of the door and then do that. But yeah, it's definitely not against that sort of stuff. I don't really like locking up my ideas. I figure if someone wants to make another Morph, then power to them. Love to see more of them.
Great, nice. Sick stuff. Because I feel like even within industrial design, I guess the internet's a good way for people to connect right now that we don't have physical connection. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Absolutely. I think even though a lot of the projects are super basic, I love scrolling through places, things like Instructables or Behance or whatever, and just seeing what people are up to. Even if they're really simple projects, you can often find some really interesting solutions to problems that people have come up with. So I think it's always a good idea to keep tabs on that sort of stuff, even if you think, that's not like high design or something. I think there's some really interesting ideas to be had from really basic hobby stuff.
See?
Yeah, and that sort of that open source culture, I guess.
Great, thanks for that. Your work is really, really amazing.
Thanks. Hopefully I'll be able to share a bit more soon when it's installed. It's going to be pretty mental, I think.
Cool. Can't wait.
This is a little off topic, but I have a question for you. What do you like to do, like, outside of this work? Like, do you have, like, it sounds like, sorry, this is really bad wording, but what are your other hobbies? Like, are there other things that influence the work that you do as well?
This sort of dominates pretty much all of my spare time. um, but I guess this kind of has been my hobby for a while. Like while I was doing, while I was working for actual companies and stuff, this would be just doing my own projects was my hobby, I guess, and developing them in my own time. Just so I had something to fall back on or to just keep me sane. Essentially, I mean, it was really good during lockdown. So I was still, locked down when this project still technically wasn't happening.
Yeah.
So it was good to keep me sane to sort of just keep chipping away at it just in case another client popped up. Yeah, I guess apart from that, there isn't a whole lot I do other than I love to watch other people making stuff. Follow a lot of people on YouTube just doing crazy projects, even on stuff unrelated to what I'm doing. And then I've got an old crappy car that I like to work on. Yeah, I guess design or just making crazy things is more my hobby at the moment.
Yeah, I've also just got a question. So Lucius would actually like to ask you a question. Lucius, if you want to jump in.
Yeah, hi. I don't know if
Hi.
I find I think I'm lagging. Am I good? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we're
Yeah,
hearing you
gotcha.
fine.
Just a quick question about like going back to your honors time. How did you stay motivated? Because maybe because of pandemic or whatever, I'm like struggling to be motivated and being on the rail. I'm always like
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a really tricky thing to do, and I was definitely not. I was just like plowing ahead the whole time on the rail. Early on in honors, I had no idea what I was going to do. I was super down about it as well, and I didn't really land on the final idea until second semester, and even then, like, it wasn't just super clear in my mind that it was going to be this crazy ball or anything. There were just, I mean, yeah, I was getting a bit worried about it, to be honest. I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I haven't got a thing. But I got some good advice at the time, and they just said basically like just start making something. It doesn't matter what, just do a thing. Don't worry about your writing for a little while, because that was a whole other thing that I didn't want to worry about. Because like just worry about the writing later. Just focus on making something. It doesn't have to be anything because that will spark some ideas. Yeah, there's no hard, fast sort of ways around it. It is a really challenging thing to do. But once if you're able to find a project that you're really passionate about, that's probably the easiest thing you can do to motivate yourself. Because as soon as you find something where you can see the end goal and the end that's like really inspiring to you, then there's no limit to the work that you can do. And I'd say, like, if it's really important to you, don't like just go for it. Don't limit yourself because you think you need. I didn't sleep a whole lot. It's probably not the best way of approaching it, but to me, like that extra hour or so every day was super important, and I was just super motivated once I'd landed on this idea. And then I guess some of it was fear, like fear that I wouldn't finish, and I would have this pile of wires on the floor of the exhibition, and that's a really good driver as well, because I guess this project in particular was an all or nothing kind of thing, because you couldn't really describe it very well in renders or not easily. It really had to be materialized to be understood. So the fear of that not happening was a pretty good driver.
Sick. That was a good answer. Thank you. Like,
No
you
worries.
mentioned like, you're not like you didn't sleep that much while you're doing it, because like I'm the opposite right now. You know, like I'm like,
And that's a natural reaction to not wanting to do it. I did that
yeah,
early on.
like, because it's like, I remember when I was just doing, you know, normal semester, and I used to like sleep maybe 2 hours every day, which is not good. But like,
No.
you know, it's like because like I had to do it, I was doing it, but like now, even though I know how to do it, like know that I need to do it, I'm like,
Yeah.
lacking off a little, which is, I don't know, like, yeah, it's something maybe I just got to figure out.
I mean, yeah, it's a tricky balance. Like, you don't want to overdo it. Like, you know, sleeping 10 or 12 hours a day is probably not so good, but you still want to, like, there's this trade-off. If you don't sleep enough, then you're probably working at half capacity the next day. So you just got to keep an eye on that and make sure you're fueling yourself so you can actually think properly. But I mean, sometimes it's necessary to just crunch it out.
Yeah.
But yeah, probably like I've done all nights, and I've done nights where I've done 2 or 3 hours a night. It definitely takes a toll on you. I wouldn't advise on doing that frequently. If you think that that will get you to the end goal, I'd say go for it. But also, yeah, don't push yourself too hard by doing that all the time. That should be very infrequent in almost emergency circumstances, I would say, because you'll burn out really quickly if you're doing that often.
And just a follow-up question. You said you came up with the idea like in second semester. How did you manage your time during that time?
It was kind of tricky because to fund this, I was working part-time 3 or 4 days a week, I think. So basically every spare moment in the end, more I was working on this. And it was challenging to find enough time. I didn't really I'm not a super organized person. I just sort of, in my head, find whatever the most logical path to the next objective is, and then just sort of work towards it. There's definitely better ways of doing it. I'm probably not the best person for that sort of advice, but I would say just make sure you're always chipping away at it, even if it's something really basic. Just keep the pedals going, keep moving, even if that's at a snail pace. It's something. Don't be too hard on yourself that you're not doing amazing amounts of work and you're not producing heaps of sketches or heaps of ideas. Just doing something just to keep your mind on the project is way better than just giving up and doing nothing.
All good. Thank you.
Nice.
I had another question.
Yeah, go for it.
Did you listen to your supervisors?
Yeah.
And did you care about marking schemes? Like, because it's 2 things. I feel like there's supervisors and then marking schemes, and sometimes they'll tell you to follow the marking schemes.
Yeah. I would say I ignored that a little bit, but I mean, you've just got to. I mean, the writing side of things, the thesis side of things, was definitely not the strongest part of my project. So in that sort of sense, I was working to the marking schemes just to get the bare minimum in there. But yeah, I mean, I think it's worth listening to your supervisors for sure. They've definitely got good advice. But if you are really passionate about going in a different direction, I would say just prove them otherwise. If you have different views, the best thing you can do is to sort of turn them around and understand your idea. And that can be really challenging to communicate sometimes, but that's probably one of the most useful skills you could teach yourself, is to convince someone of why your idea is good. Because, they might disagree with it, but it might not be because it's a bad idea. It might be because you just haven't communicated it well enough. So the challenge is then to bring them around and see if you can. But also, it might be a bad idea. So it's always good to listen to that. I'll always try and be as open as I can to other people's advice. As soon as you start locking that out and saying, oh no, I'm better than you, I'm not going to listen to your ideas, that's super dangerous. You'll very quickly stagnate. I would say listen to everybody, share your ideas, even with people who aren't doing design. I think that's a really interesting way to get alternative perspectives on things. Yeah.
Great. That's good to hear.
No worries. Yeah, I would say, listen to them, but also you don't have to.
Yeah. Mm.
I've also just got a question from Cecilia, and she's asking, are there any media, be it games, movies, artists, or books, that you take inspiration from?
Yeah, anything sci-fi, I guess. I've really recently been revisiting stuff like Blade Runner and anything that's got those crazy neon lighting sort of vibes and dystopian worlds. I really love that sort of stuff. Like Ghost in the Shell, I don't know, there's all sorts of things, even like games like Halo, anything that's like sci-fi and weird and cool. I love that sort of stuff. And then that, I guess, feeds into the design stuff that I do. It's pretty like functional looking stuff, but it's all still kind of artistic in the same way.
That's great. I've also got Shashank, I think, would like to ask you a question as well, if you want to jump in.
Yeah, hi Nick. I'm just want to ask, in the design process or like early on in a brief, have you found yourself like getting stuck on an idea early on, and then like how do you how do you push that? Because I found myself in the past, I have an idea early on and I struggle to like move on from trying exploring more ideas.
Yeah, so you get stuck on that initial idea, you mean?
Yeah, like you just keep developing that rather than trying to expand into other places. Maybe.
Everyone does it. You're not alone. It's not an easy thing to move away from. I'd say you're always encouraged not to stay on that idea. And I would say that's true, but also that it's okay for that idea to be the good idea. Don't discount it, but also don't discount the rest of the ideas. As far as moving away from it, apart from just exploring as many options as you can, I don't know, maybe bringing yourself into a different context to sort of flip the idea on its head. Maybe those are good ways of doing it. Go somewhere could be the NGV or whatever the online alternative to that is at the minute, and just look at completely unrelated things. Maybe it's not an easy thing to do, and everyone gets stuck on it, I would say. Apart from just exploring as much as you can, talking. If you really want just to talk to other people, I would say talk to people who don't know your project, try and explain your project to them. And they might have, I mean, they might just understand it in a completely different way that sort of switches the way you think about it. And that might unlock new ideas. But yeah, also that idea might be good, so I wouldn't throw it away.
Thanks, I like that. Yeah, don't discount the first idea as well. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I've always received that advice, like, you know, don't settle on your first idea. It's always like this like taboo thing to do. But I think it's totally okay if that's, you know, genuinely what you think the best solution is. Just as long as you go through the process to try and, you know, bring in new perspectives to that and improve that idea at least, I think it's totally okay.
Right. We are also coming towards the end of our last 5 minutes. So if anyone else has any quick questions I'd like to ask Nicholas now, feel free to jump in. If not, I'll go ahead and ask the last question.
Moving.
Oh, what do you sort of did you sort of think about trying to get a traditional design job, or did you sort of have to make a leap to sort of do your own thing? And do you think there is a leap that exists, a leap of faith, if something? Yeah.
I mean, I guess I was fortunate that I didn't really have to leap so much. I was still working. I mean, I had a real job 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So I just transitioned straight into this, and like Augmentl was just a side project before that.
But you didn't really have any design job as per se, did you? Was it?
Well, so I worked for a electronics engineering company that had a sort of industrial design branch, I guess. And then RMIT. But yeah, neither of them were traditional industrial design consultancies or anything, but I was using all the same skills.
Yep.
When I was going through uni, I wanted that sort of job. I think it would still be an interesting thing to do. That's a really interesting sort of way of designing. But yeah, I mean, my whole approach was just to work as hard as I could and generate as many cool ideas as I could, so that I could just sort of jump into some sort of professional role as smoothly as possible. Like university is a really good time to explore your own ideas. So I would really encourage people to do that. But yeah, I was just fortunate in the fact that me just doing crazy stuff ended up being, you know, a viable business thing.
Yeah, that answers it. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
Great stuff. So yeah, we are coming to the end of the session today. So I think maybe just to quickly wrap this up as well, I think just one last, not so much a question, I guess maybe just a point. I think overall, as for, I suppose anyone within industrial design or really just this whole huge blend of design, is there any major advice or things that you've learned throughout your entire career, like your biggest pointer that you think would help a lot for anyone that sort of pursues this path that you like to share?
I mean, I would say I'm still very early on in it. I mean, it looks like I've done a lot, but it's still a long way to go. My advice would be just to, if possible, do whatever you're passionate about. And to try and, you know, push your own ideas, not like force your ideas on people, but try and learn how to explain your ideas really well. And that can be verbally, visually is even better. but I think you'll go a long way if you're able to communicate really well, particularly with people who aren't designers. So that's like a whole nother way of communicating. That's why we do visual stuff, I guess, but it's how do you explain that verbally as well, and how do you, I think it's a really hard thing. It's something that I've not nailed, but if you can do it, it makes your life a whole lot easier. But yeah, I've still got a lot to learn. I'm still pretty early on in the process.
That's very great words. But otherwise, I think that would be the time for us today. Thank you so much for spending your morning with us for the Industrial Design Community. I think, also, if anyone's also wanting to follow up more or learning a little bit more about Nicholas's work as well, we've got all the websites that we've shared, his portfolio and such. Is there anything you'd like to share here with with everyone here to learn more about what you'll be coming up with?
If you want, most of the stuff I post is on at Augmentl Studio. That'll be all stuff related to the ball. You can keep an eye on that. When I remember to post stuff, I'll try and keep it up to date. But yeah, that's probably the best place to find stuff.
Fantastic. Otherwise, thanks everyone for coming, and also again, thank you so much, Nicholas, for spending the time with us today. We're also having this recorded, so we'll also be sharing this out through Student One email. We'll have it on a drive. But otherwise, yes, have a fantastic rest of your day, Nicholas, and also again to everyone. Thanks for coming in.
Good luck.
Thanks,
Nick.
Thank you.
All right, fantastic.